Colorless crocs. Now, snakes aren't the only reptiles that can carry off a set of wonderfully white scales. Crocodiles, especially those bred and raised on specialized farms or in sanctuaries, can also sport near spotless pelts like this. Somehow, that ghostly silhouette makes them look even more dangerous than their dark-colored kin. On crocodile farms, just about 1 in every 10,000 hatchlings that survive into adulthood are white. But that figure gets much lower in the wild. Because nature is cruel, only 20 to 30% of crocodile eggs hatch when they're exposed to the elements, and just 1% of hatchlings survive into adulthood. But pure white crocs are more visible to predators than the average hatchling, so even fewer of them live to become big, fearsome crocs. Though when they do, like this freshwater croc called Pearl by locals in Australia, they're an absolutely magnificent sight to behold. As you can see from the black flecks on her back, Pearl isn't an albino. She was born with hypomelanism, a rare condition resulting in reduced pigmentation in her skin. Even though she's not as white as the driven snow, this still makes her one super rare croc. Albino alligators. Across the pond from their crocodilian brothers, alligators are another reptile you might not expect to see clad in pearly scales. And yet, these two great gators look like they've been given a coat of white gloss paint. With their pinkish-colored eyes and alabaster scales, albino alligators, like crocodiles, are incredibly rare in the wild. With similar survival rates to the crocs, the odds are stacked against any bright white babies surviving out in the open. But this gator farm in Colorado has a couple of female and male albino alligators, which they, encourage to increase the population, if you know what I mean. Even with these intense conservation efforts, biologists estimate there are just 100 albino gators in the entire world. Amazingly though, leucistic gators like Trezo J here are actually thought to be much rarer. While their loss of pigment is pretty incredible to see on its own, these gators also sport sets of bizarrely bright blue eyes. But how rare do these traits make them? Well, in 2019, a lowly 11 leucistic gators were known of worldwide. Oh snap. The real white whale. Anyone who's ever read Moby Dick might think that white whales can only be found in fiction. But there's one whale who's not only very white, he's also very real. This remarkable humpback whale called Migaloo, not Moby, was first spotted back in 1991 off the eastern coast of Australia. Back then, researchers estimated he was around 3 years old, and today, at more than 30 years old, he's thought to be the only white humpback whale in the world. Current estimates put the humpback whale population between 120,000 and 150,000. That's pretty astonishing considering it hit a low of just 440 back in the 1950s, before a series of whaling bans were put into effect. Even so, the fact that Migaloo has survived so far into adulthood is nothing short of a miracle. Because humpback whale calves can take up to 10 years to develop into adults, predators, poachers, or sometimes plain bad luck can get them when they're most vulnerable. This means that up to 24% of humpback whale calves devastatingly don't make it into their prime. Considering how easy a target Migaloo's color would have made him as he was growing up, it's astonishing that he made it into adulthood. Because of his incredible color, he's becoming something of a hit with eager tourists who want to get a photo with him. But in 2003, this led to disaster when one group of tourists got too close and accidentally scarred his back with the boat's propeller. After that, a protection order was set up, and boats are no longer allowed to sail within 1,640 feet of him. But that hasn't stopped him from approaching them, though, much to his fans' delight. Luminous lions. Lions are another of nature's biologically majestic animals. White lions, on the other paw, are made all the more amazing by rare recessive traits that turn their caramel coats a proud pale. And this guy certainly got the lion's share of that rare genetic mutation. But even though their fur is white as snow, you can see the skin of their nose, eyes, and mouth all hold a dark pigment. And that's because most white lions aren't albinos. They're actually leucistic. And this male clearly isn't afraid to shout about it. Sadly, there are just 13 white lions prowling around in the wild, with around 100 more in captivity, most of which are in their native homeland of South Africa. You might think that's because those dazzling coats make surviving out on the savannah pretty difficult. I mean, how are they meant to sneak up on prey if they look like bright white beacons in the long grass? Well, scientists studying these amazing creatures discovered that despite their apparent disadvantage, white lions and regular lions have similar hunting kill rates. So, if they're not going hungry, why aren't there more of these bleached big cats in the wild? And upsettingly, that comes down to us humans. Since they were discovered by Europeans back in 1938, they've typically been hunted down or caged and used for breeding. And despite being on the verge of extinction, they aren't on the endangered species list because they technically fall under the same species as ordinary tawny lions. This means they have almost no protection against being hunted in the wild. That's enough to make any big cat lover want to roar with rage. Gorgeous giraffes. Back in 2017, rumors began to spread of a tall, ghostly figure stalking the Ishakbini Conservation in Kenya. At first, it sounded so far-fetched that rangers didn't believe that such a creepy-sounding creature existed. But several months later, they were left stunned when they were confronted by this impossible-looking animal. It was a leucistic giraffe, an almost entirely white, 15-foot-tall animal with the faint blonde patches of its spots barely visible. And it wasn't alone. Shuffling along nearby was an equally bright white baby. Considering the giraffe population has dropped by almost 40% in the last 30 years, leaving less than 70,000 of them in the wild, the sighting of such an impossible pair was miraculous. Alongside habitat loss, poachers after the animal's prized pelts and meat will stop at nothing to hunt the animals, illegally breaching protected areas to do so. And sadly, the rarity of this pair was too much for poachers to resist. In 2020, both this mother and this baby were found barbarically slain, leaving just one white giraffe left in Kenya. Though its patterning wasn't as white as the others, the rangers couldn't risk its safety, so decided to track the last remaining animal. With its whereabouts being broadcast to the rangers 24/7, they hope this will deter the poachers from wiping out the very last white giraffe. Amazing apes. The tree-filled habitats of most monkeys mean that dark-colored fur is essential for camouflaging themselves from forest-dwelling predators. That's why you won't spot any chimps donning parrot-like colors, or any gorillas naturally dyed in neon. What a wild rave that would be. However, like most mammals, monkeys can also suffer from freak gene mutations, like this albino long-haired macaque, found in a zoo in Malaysia. Because they're so much easier to spot ghosting through the trees in the wild, a lot of albino monkeys are kept in captivity for their own safety. Although you have to admit, this macaque doesn't look very happy about that decision. Thankfully, not all of them are destined for a life trapped in a cage, like this extraordinary little orangutan. This species of great ape is native to Indonesia and is famed for its unusual bright orange fur. But in 2017, news reached the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation of a young, pure white orangutan that had been found by locals. The young female, who was just 5 years old, was discovered incredibly stressed and dehydrated in a patch of recently cleared forest. Deforestation is the main reason why there are a little over 100,000 orangutans left in the wild. But she was thankfully rescued by the sanctuary, who fittingly named her Alba. While she's been described as the only albino orangutan in the world, Her bright blue eyes would suggest she's actually leucistic. Either way, she's still a remarkably rare ape. After recovering and forming a close bond with another female orangutan in the sanctuary, called Kika, the pair were eventually released in 2018. Since then, the pair have thrived in the wild, and hopefully will continue to for a long time to come. True white turtles. The Kasgoda Turtle Hatchery on the coast of Sri Lanka is an institute dedicated to protecting all sea turtles and increasing their hatching rates. They don't just rescue eggs that have been laid by mother turtles on risky beaches, they also help them hatch and release them back into the wild. However, it would seem some turtles are just too precious for them to let go of. Videoed swimming about in a tiny concrete tank, a pair of strikingly bright white turtles haunt the hatchery's waters. Often reported as albinos, the bright blue of their eyes and fans of pigment on their shells indicate they're more likely to be leucistic. But as captivating as they are to watch, they've been kept cruelly confined to this pitiful little pool for years. A recent investigation from the National Geographic accused hatcheries like this of keeping rare white turtles purely to attract tourists. And while they may appear healthy, these tanks are actually breeding grounds for disease and bacteria. They might be safe from rogue fishing nets and predators, but this dire situation is enough to leave any animal shell-shocked. Golden zebras. When it comes to black and white animals, the most famous of them all has to be the zebra. The three living species of this African animal all sport black stripes on their white fur coats, from their muzzles down to their hooves. However, some individuals were born to stick out from the herd, like Zoe here. Born in captivity in Hawaii, Zoe wasn't white and black as much as she was white and blonde. Along with her golden stripes, her mane was also shockingly blonde, almost like she'd visited a bleach-obsessed hairdresser. She was often described as the world's only albino zebra, but as we know by now, if she was truly albino, those stripes wouldn't be visible at all. Like the previously mentioned snakes, Zoe actually had amelanism, meaning she lacked the ability to produce all but a few pigments. The condition is shared by several other zebras in captivity, but they're so rarely seen in the wild that almost nothing is known about how prevalent this condition is. While standing out from the crowd doesn't appear to affect their social acceptance within the herd, wearing blonde stripes in a sea of black poses some challenges. A study from 2014 revealed that zebras evolved their black and white stripes to deter bugs from biting them, not as a form of camouflage, as most people believe. So, without this bold bug deterrent, golden zebras are believed to have a harder time keeping the bites at bay. I guess that means that blondes don't always have more fun.